It's time to give these young people a diet of positivity and hope rather than alarmism and despair. Well, why am I telling you this? Today, the Prime Minister has said that children should be taught at school about the massacres of Indigenous people by British settlers because he wants Australians to have a fair dinkum knowledge of history, and truth-telling on the atrocities faced by Indigenous people should be part of learning about Australian history. He said that the truth is that Indigenous people have suffered a lot. Massacres occurred. He said, and we need to be truthful about that. Not as a way of being shamed, he said, but just as being fair dinkum. Well, we have an overhauled national curriculum, education curriculum. In layman's terms, it's full of all this stuff about First Peoples and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history. The curriculum even talks about the concept of an invasion. The Indigenous Australians Minister, Linda Burney, talked about this stuff on Monday when she said, quote, "The story of invasion and conquest for the Wiradjuri is a brutal one. Massacre sites are dotted over my lands. The scars are evident for all of us to see." What depressing stuff. I don't know anyone who denies this stuff. But this country was colonised, and before it was colonised, it was a place where people lived by hunting and gathering. Colonising gave Australia the wealth and prosperity that everyone now enjoys. $30 billion a year of taxpayers' money is given to close the gap. I don't have a problem with teaching that part of our history. But who is teaching and celebrating the heritage associated with Western civilisation? Or are we encouraged that by invasion, we don't really belong here? In fact, we live here via the permission of other people. Welcome to country. There's plenty of pontification about the virtue of preserving our pre-European Indigenous culture, and we seem to fall over ourselves on that. We have it almost shoved down our throats. But the reality is this country evolved from those early times to build a future that everyone enjoys, including Indigenous Australians. But when Jacinta Price and I spoke years ago about the violence towards Indigenous women and children in the Northern Territory, none of these people pontificating about a voice or preserving Indigenous culture, or Anthony Albanese, none of them argued, while they're now arguing we should teach about the massacres, none of them then spoke out. Why don't we teach about the abandonment by Indigenous leaders of their own people? Here we are in 2022. Their own people are suffering from violence and abuse, and they're abandoned. And if we're going to teach about the Indigenous culture, are we going to concede in our teachings what Western civilisation has given everybody? Freedoms, democracy, art, music, literature, the parliamentary form of government, one person, one vote, the rule of law. These things were brought to us of infinite benefit to everybody by our becoming a Western liberal democracy. Yes, we were colonised. And so we have Indigenous people elected to our parliaments. But where is the Prime Minister saying we should also teach the history of our great explorers, Lawson, Blackstone, Wentworth, Hume and Hovell, Burke and Wills, Alan Cunningham? Our children leave school knowing nothing about any of that. Do they read the works of Bronte and Dickens and Thackeray? Do they recite the poetry of Banjo Paterson and Henry Lawson, Judith Wright or Kenneth Slessor? Young people come out of school knowing nothing of the magnificent benefits of the Western culture and our institutions. Surely if we're being asked to acknowledge and respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, isn't it time some political leader ended this woke nonsense and affirmed the fact that our Western liberal democracy has provided great benefits for everybody? It has stood the test of time. Let's teach our young people about those who have contributed so much to the extraordinary way of life that we enjoy. Give us a break from this talk about massacres.